Welcome to Aro Ling Cardiff, and this evening we have Ngakma Nor'dzin talking to us on the topic of the Skandhas. So over to Ngakma Nor'dzin.
Thank you. Yeah, topic of the Skandhas is a very interesting one. Skandha means collection, aggregate, or heap. And in this teaching, there are 5 of these things. Pung Pung Na, in Tibetan, are the 5 Skandhas. And from the point of view of this teaching, everything that we think of as I is the result of the activities of the Skandhas. So first, I thought I would quickly go through each of them in terms of a brief description, and then return to them again to talk about their operation and the evolution of the Skandhas as a process and what that means to us. So the first Skandha is form, and this includes all matter, whether external in terms of the world around us, or internal in terms of the senses that we have, or the thoughts. So the senses, whether they're the normal senses of feeling or the sense of conception or thinking. And this is the basis really for all the Skandhas. They all rely upon the base of form. In Sanskrit it's rupa, and in Tibetan it's zug. The next Skandha is feeling vedana or shorwa. And this is where the internal world and the external world make contact through the medium of the senses. And we can find the sensations as being pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. And we sense the external world, and we feel the solidity of the external world, and that helps confirm the solidity of our existence as a result. The next Skandha is perception or samjna or dushe. And we recognize what we have sensed at this point. And we have the reactions of attraction, aversion, and indifference as a result. And this further helps to solidify the sense of I, because we now have some idea of how this may confirm our existence. Then the 4th Skandha is the one of intellect or samskara or duche. And this is the collection of our reactions. This is the collection of mental and emotional states and habits. And to some extent at this point, we've arrived. Here we are. And finally, there's consciousness or vijnana, or in Tibetan, nampa shepa. And this is where we create a highly sophisticated thinking process to help keep this all together. This is the fruition. This is derived from all the previous experiences of the Skandhas. So we have consciousness, we have our thought processes, just to hold it all together. So then, if we look at the process of evolution of the skandhas and what that might mean to us. Now, this process is fast, really fast. Trungpa Rinpoche says it happens in about a 500th of a second. So there's almost a sense of it being simultaneous, instantaneous. We generally wouldn't notice it as a process of separate steps. And so this teaching is drawing out this process to give us maybe a chance to recognize aspects of what's happening. So with form, the first thing is that the initial perception that we have, there's a gap. There's a sense of spaciousness. There's a sense of the sense of form and emptiness as a unified experience. And we have a glimpse of the possibilities of openness and awareness, and crucially, absence of self. At that point, a doubt arises, a question arises. If we have a sense of form and emptiness as being indivisible, if we have a sense of selflessness, if we have a sense of the absence of self, the question arises, it must be a very fast question. The question arises, what if I find there's no real me? Because most of the time we think of me, as a thing that exists. But at this point, at this instantaneous point, there's a doubt. What if there's no real me? And we're somewhat bewildered by this. We want to hold on to something. We want to create something that will give us a sense of form. And the only thing we've got to work with is space. So at this point, we're attempting to solidify space. So how do we go about that? We attempt to prove our existence by making contact with the outside world. The more we can make the outside world real, the more it's possible that we might be real as well. And as I said before, we make contact with the outside world through our senses. We see things, we hear things, we taste things, we touch things, we smell things, and we ideate things as well. And all of this is the senses making contact with the outside world. Those senses result in feelings of whether we have a sense of whether these things are pleasant or unpleasant, or really neither here nor there. And from this develops the next skandha, the skandha of perception. Perception is about reaction. Perception is about understanding and that sense of what do we do with these feelings that we have. And so we have a reaction. We have reactions in terms of attraction, aversion, and indifference. So if what we're perceiving seems pleasant in terms of, is this confirming me in some way? Is this confirming my identity, my sense of self? Then we're attracted towards it and we want more of that. if it's somehow undermining our identity, undermining our sense of self, we'll be averse to it and we'll withdraw from it. And if it's neither here nor there, we'll be indifferent to it. And then we become numb to that experience. We're not interested. We don't take part in whatever's happening there. We can't manipulate it. And these are our strategies. Having made contact, having had these sensations, having had these reactions, we develop these into a strategy for being. And these strategies ultimately can't work because the strategies are based on a fiction from the beginning. The fiction being that we had a sense of selflessness, we didn't want to be part of that, we didn't want it to be true, and everything that follows from that is attempting to paper over the cracks, is attempting to develop a fiction. So we have this fiction that involves attraction, aversion, and indifference, and this becomes more elaborate and in a sense more desperate the more we try to make it work, the more we try to screen ourselves off from that initial perception. Then we take our definitions, and the next step is intellect. There starts to be more of a sense of intelligence about what we're doing. It's not simply our reaction to these feelings. There's more of a sense of categorization, more of a sense of a further development of strategy. So when we come across things, we already have some idea of official categories for things. This looks like that. This is one of those. We start to pigeonhole our experiences. We make them official experiences in our minds, and this helps to develop the sense of the world and ourselves as real things. All our perceptions start to go through this categorization process. And there is considerable intelligence going on there. And then this develops into consciousness, and consciousness is the final step of marshalling it all together and developing what Trungpa Rinpoche refers to as fantasy worlds with which we occupy ourselves. And these fantasy worlds include the realms of being, for example. So everything we go through in terms of hell or heaven or whatever experiences we're going through, these are fantasies that we have created based on our first refusal to see spaciousness and to see selflessness, and this has developed gradually. I say gradually, this has all happened in an instant as far as we're concerned, but we're trying to stretch things out to get some sort of way in behind our own defenses, as it were. So we have our thoughts, and this whole process of consciousness is marshalling these, and we move swiftly from one thought to another. We're hopping about between thoughts and emotions and feelings, and consciousness is there as a thought generator. It's generating thoughts all the time and making sure that there's no gap. We don't want to see a gap in terms of perception. We don't want to see any kind of indication that selflessness might be at the root of all of this. So when we hear these teachings, there's a question of what do we make of this and what do we do about it? To begin with, just knowing that there is a mechanism, there is a process, however swift, is helpful in terms of starting to maybe see its stages, starting to understand that what appear to be instantaneous reactions to situations aren't necessarily that instantaneous. Inevitably, one of the things that we have to do is practice silent sitting, because silent sitting is almost the only opportunity that we have to disrupt the process, to actually rob the skandhas and rob the evolutionary process of the skandhas of its momentum. If we don't sit, then really we don't have much chance of seeing beyond thought, unless something happens adventitiously to suddenly create a break. But usually when that happens, if we get a sudden shock, it doesn't last long and we return to thought as quickly as possible. But having heard these teachings, if you do get a sudden shock and there is a break in thought, it's possible to cooperate with that at that point in time and not panic that we need to start reintroducing thought again. So we can approach this via silent sitting, and that helps to develop a sense of spaciousness and a sense of transparency in terms of our perception of what happens, and gives us a starting point for noticing the evolution of the process of the skandhas. It makes it possible to remain with the initial sense of spaciousness. Now, although it sounds like we're getting onto a very fast-moving train or something by leaping onto the skandhas, it has this other optimistic quality. It means that 500 times a second, we have an opportunity to break that cycle. We have an opportunity to recognize spaciousness. So I don't know, somebody might like to calculate how many of those there might be in our waking lives. So if we're awake for 16 hours a day, you've got 16 times 60 times 60 times 500, whatever that might be.
3,000 a minute or something?
There are, it's vast, yes, yeah. So, I mean, I take photos and you see what a camera captures in 1/100th of a second. This is 5 times faster than that. So this is sort of stilling the hummingbird's wing or something like that. I don't know, but it's an incredible opportunity just to know that that's there. So it's not like, oh, I've messed up today, try again tomorrow. It's like I've messed up this instant, try again now. And now, and now, and now. So I think the whole thing is remarkably optimistic, and it just gives us a chance to see what we're doing. What also happens is that it gives us the opportunity to pick up the process at any stage. So we might miss the first step of the process. That's probably the hardest one to to see. We may have already gone beyond that. It may be that we've already got our senses hitting the outside world in the way that they do. But we can start to pick up on, how does that feel? How do I react to how that feels? The development of habit patterns around how I react to how that feels, and the consolidation that goes on in terms of the security of our continual thought generating process that is marshalling the armies of the skandhas to make sure that nothing gets through those defenses. We have those opportunities all the time, and the possibility of seeing those mechanisms at work. We can also work backwards. We may have reacted to something. We can start to understand where that reaction came from in terms of the mechanisms of the skandhas. We can start to see how that particular reaction of anger or worry or avariciousness or whatever it might be, how that has developed from the ground of nothing at all. And we can start to work our way back through that and start to stretch our experience, because silent sitting is not just sitting on a cushion or whatever happens there. Silent sitting, you take with you. You take the results of silent sitting with you and bring that spaciousness into your everyday experience. And it does give us the chance to see into the process in its various ways. So just through the practice of silent sitting, whether you gain dramatic realization on your cushion or not, you're bringing that into your everyday life anyway, and starting to see these mechanisms. And it may not be a pretty sight to begin with. And to some extent, we understand that it's not going to be a pretty sight, because if we look at these teachings and realize that it's all developed on a denial of reality, it's not going to be particularly pretty. We're going to have to look at ourselves and what we've done in terms of the development of that initial denial of reality. But looking at it is so much better than not looking at it, because as one teacher said, you're going to be driven by it anyway if you don't look at it. So you might as well look at it and see how it works, and start to come to an understanding. This is how I work. This is why I work like that. And these are the opportunities in terms of realization that arise as a result of practicing, as a result of silent sitting, and as a result of seeing my own mechanism, whatever that might consist of. So just to recap briefly, what we've looked at over the space of maybe half an hour is a process that takes a 500th of a second. And that process is happening every 500th of a second. 500th of a second might actually be fairly arbitrary. I don't know. I don't think anyone's ever got a stopwatch to it. And you have to be fairly far along the path of practice, I would have thought, to be able to notice all of these things and how they're happening. But during that period of time, we developed, through our initial reaction to space, we developed our need to prove ourselves, It's like the Big Bang, really. What happened in the Big Bang and how quickly did that happen? So we develop that need to prove our existence. We prove our existence through the fact that we have feelings. We prove our existence through the fact that we respond to those feelings. We develop habits out of that, out of those responses. And those habits are also a protection mechanism. We've got a go-to. My primary go-to might be anger. It could be anything for any of us. And these are my defense mechanisms against things that seem to threaten my sense of existence. And by developing habits out of them, we don't have to think too much more about how we defend ourselves or how we defend our lack of self. And then marshalling all that together is our thought process, which would include things like justification. That's another level of sophistication. Of course, I reacted angrily. Anyone would react angrily. And we develop these habits. We justify these habits in order to maintain this whole process. So for us, now that we've seen that there's a process, and now that we've seen that there's a possibility of undermining the process, the thing we have to do is just remember that the process exists and to continue with the practice of silent sitting. And from that, after that process, once we've engaged with that, liberation is assured from the continual evolution of these skandhas. Okay.
It's very closely connected with the 12 interdependent links.
I was wondering.
Yeah, because they're all in there. I think something that always amazes me about these teachings is that the realized masters have the capacity to be present and aware in a 500th of a second, at the speed of mind.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that just feels unfathomable, but I guess that's what we're all aiming for in silent sitting.
Yes, indeed. Yes. I often see these teachings as coming from somebody who's made it to the top of the mountain and they're looking down at other people who want to come up the mountain, and they can say, if you go left a bit or right a bit, or you want to avoid that boulder. So all these different teachings cascade out of that, and they come to people in different ways because we're all struggling with different aspects of the hill. Oh, there's a slope of scree there. You might want to do something different about that. Or here's a rope. You know, maybe I can help you up a bit. But these people who give these teachings have to have got to that point, as you say, that point of perception. And then the teachings come out of that point of perception to help anyone who can then begin to see their reality in that way and see that development.
And as you said, if you can get some spaciousness in there, there's a possibility eventually, if there's enough space, that you can enter the speed of mind more.
Yes. Yeah, at some point, yeah, certainly at some point in that evolution, you go, right, that's what I'm doing. Yeah. So I think it's wonderful, something to be extremely grateful for, that these teachings have appeared in ways that we can use and ways that we can prove to ourselves that we can make use of the teachings.
Yeah.
Because as Ngakpa Rinpoche always says, Buddhism is a religion of method, not a religion of truth. So along with every teaching, there's a method, and with every method, there's the opportunity of proving the usefulness of that teaching.
Yeah. And although Shine is not an easy practice, silent sitting and letting go of thought, if you persevere, even after 3 months, you can start to notice a result, a slight increase in spaciousness. So then it's just a matter of carrying on.
Yes, it's just a matter of continuing.
Well, that was marvellous. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed.